This is the story of how a single island, a single company, and a handful of machines built in the Netherlands came to define the balance of global power in the 21st century. What you are about to hear is the story of the silicon shield, the doctrine that says modern semiconductors are now what oil was in the 20th century, and whoever controls them controls the future. The phrase itself traces back to an Australian journalist named Craig Addison, who first articulated it in 2000 in an op-ed, before developing the full argument in his 2001 book titled Silicon Shield: Taiwan's Protection Against Chinese Attack. His thesis was simple but provocative, arguing that Taiwan's role at the heart of the global digital economy would itself act as a deterrent. Beijing would not invade because it could not afford to destroy what it depended on, and Washington would defend Taiwan because no replacement source existed for the chips powering everything modern. Addison framed the factories themselves as a kind of weapon, silent, indispensable, and impossible to substitute. 2 decades later, that argument is being tested in real time. To grasp why, you need to understand just how concentrated this industry has become, because Taiwan produces roughly 60% of the world's semiconductors and approximately 90% of the most advanced chips. Almost all of that advanced production happens at one company, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, known simply as TSMC. TSMC was founded in 1987 by Morris Chang, a remarkable figure in his own right. Born in mainland China in 1931, Chang fled the Japanese invasion as a boy, and he eventually came to the United States, earned degrees at MIT, and completed a PhD at Stanford before spending 25 years at Texas Instruments. Recruited to Taiwan in 1985, he founded TSMC 2 years later at the age of 56, and his innovation was the pure-play foundry model, a company that only manufactured chips and never competed with its own customers. That single decision is the reason Apple, NVIDIA, AMD, and Qualcomm all rely on TSMC today. The numbers behind that dominance are staggering. According to Counterpoint Research, TSMC held 64% of global foundry revenue in the third quarter of 2024. And at the most advanced 3-nanometer node, the company effectively has no competition. In 2024, TSMC reported revenue of just over $90 billion, net income above $36 billion, and a workforce exceeding 83,000 people worldwide. The story does not end with raw manufacturing, because TSMC also dominates a process called CoWoS, the advanced packaging technology required to build modern AI accelerators like NVIDIA's H100 and Blackwell GPUs. According to Morgan Stanley Research, NVIDIA has secured more than 60% of TSMC's CoWoS capacity for 2025 and 2026. And the top customers, including NVIDIA, AMD, Apple, Google, Broadcom, and Amazon, have locked in over 85% of that capacity through 2026. Put another way, the entire global AI boom runs through a few buildings on one island, and that concentration is exactly what makes the United States and China so anxious. The first major escalation came in August 2022, when President Biden signed the CHIPS and Science Act into law. The legislation allocated $52.7 billion for American semiconductor manufacturing, broken down into $39 billion in direct grants, $13.2 billion for research and workforce development, and a 25% investment tax credit. Major awards followed quickly. TSMC received offers of up to $6.6 billion in grants and $5 billion in loans for its Arizona fabs. Intel was awarded $7.865 billion. Samsung received $4.745 billion for its Texas cluster, and Micron received up to $6.165 billion for its operations in New York and Idaho. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo framed the law in stark national security terms when she told a Georgetown audience in 2023 that our defense capabilities, like hypersonic weapons, drones, and satellites, depend on a supply of chips that are not currently produced in America. On CBS, she put the point even more bluntly by noting that 250 chips sit inside a single Javelin missile launching system. Driving the entire law was a single, brutal statistic. In 1990, the United States produced 37% of the world's chips, and by 2022, that figure had collapsed to roughly 10%. The CHIPS Act was an attempt to reverse 3 decades of offshoring with one piece of legislation. 2 months after that signing, Washington went on the offensive. October 7, 2022 marked the day the Bureau of Industry and Security issued sweeping export controls aimed squarely at China, restricting advanced chips, advanced chip-making equipment, and even barring American persons from supporting advanced fabrication inside China without a license. A year later, in October 2023, those rules were tightened again to close loopholes. In December 2024, another package added 140 entities to the restricted list while bringing high-bandwidth memory under control. The goal was straightforward: to prevent China from building a leading-edge semiconductor industry capable of rivaling the West militarily and economically. Whether any of it has actually worked remains one of the most contested questions in technology policy today. In August 2023, during a visit to Beijing by Commerce Secretary Raimondo, Huawei launched the Mate 60 Pro smartphone, a device containing a chip called the Kirin 9000s, manufactured by SMYC on what analysts identified as a 7-nanometer class process, all without access to the EUV lithography machines the export controls were designed to deny. The timing struck observers as deliberate. Tech Insights analyst Dan Hutchison said the chip was a slap in the face. China responded by pouring money into self-sufficiency. In May 2024, Beijing established the third phase of its National Semiconductor Fund, known as Big Fund 3, with registered capital of roughly $47.5 billion, almost equivalent to the entire CHIPS Act. Xi Jinping has been explicit about the goal, stating in remarks published in 2021, "Only by grasping key and core technologies in our own hands can we guarantee economic security, defense security, and other aspects of national security." At the 20th Party Congress in 2022, he called for what he termed high-level scientific and technological self-reliance. The choke points extend beyond foundries to a single company that almost no consumer has ever heard of, ASML, headquartered in the Netherlands. ASML is the only manufacturer in the world capable of producing extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, the tools required to print the most advanced chips. A standard extreme ultraviolet system carries a price tag around $200 million, while the newer high-NA model runs between $370 million and $400 million per unit. Each machine is so complex that shipping one requires roughly 7 partially loaded Boeing 747s, and ASML has never sold an extreme ultraviolet machine to China. Under pressure from Washington and The Hague, the the Dutch government has progressively tightened controls on lower-end deep ultraviolet machines as well. Morris Chang himself has been remarkably blunt about what all of this means. At a 2022 ceremony in Phoenix marking the installation of equipment at TSMC's Arizona fab, the then 91-year-old Chang told the audience that globalization is almost dead. Free trade is almost dead. A lot of people still wish they would come back, but I do not think they will be back. A year later, at the Asia Society in New York, his words turned darker. It looks like countries are mad at each other. That worries me. Our only hope is it does not lead to anything even more serious. Geopolitical pressure has only intensified since the change in United States administration. In March 2025, TSMC announced an additional $100 billion in American investment, bringing the company's total United States commitment to $165 billion. CEO C.C. Wei delivered the announcement while standing alongside President Trump at the White House. The Trump administration also threatened tariffs of up to 100% on foreign-made chips, restricted NVIDIA's H20 AI chips for China in April 2025, then reversed course in July, and ultimately approved sales of even more advanced chips to China in exchange for a revenue share paid to the United States government. First 15%, then 25%. A Section 232 proclamation in January 2026 imposed a 25% tariff on advanced semiconductors. The policy environment has become almost as volatile as the technology itself. This is precisely where the original silicon shield doctrine has come under serious strain. Critics now argue the shield is eroding because as TSMC builds fabs in Arizona, in Kumamoto, Japan, and in Dresden, Germany, the case for Taiwan's unique indispensability weakens. October 2025 brought a striking moment when U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick suggested in an interview that Taiwan should move 50% of its chip manufacturing to the United States, a proposal Taiwan's vice premier rejected days later. Former TSMC chairman Mark Liu has offered a different counterargument, namely that any Chinese invasion would render the fabs inoperable, since they cannot run without continuous cooperation from European, Japanese, and American partners. The prize, in his framing, would self-destruct on contact. This is the world the silicon shield has built, a world where a single Taiwanese company, a single Dutch toolmaker, and a few hundred kilometers of fabrication facilities determine the trajectory of artificial intelligence, military power, and economic competition between the world's two largest economies. Craig Addison's argument back in 2000 was that chips would protect Taiwan, but what has happened since is something he probably did not anticipate. The chips have not just shielded an island, they have rewritten the rules of geopolitics itself. Industrial policy has come roaring back. Export controls have replaced free trade as the default, and nations that have not built fabs in 50 years are now spending hundreds of billions of dollars to build them. As Chris Miller, author of Chip War, put it, microchips are the new oil, the scarce resource on which the modern world depends. Whether the shield holds, erodes, or eventually fractures will be one of the defining questions of the next decade. What is already clear is this. For the first time in modern history, the most powerful weapon in the world is not a missile, or a fleet, or even a currency. It is a transistor, and the country that builds the most of them with the most precision holds the leverage that everything else now depends on.